For most of your life, you've probably heard the same warning. America is drowning in debt. The government is borrowing too much. The deficit is out of control. Interest payments are exploding. And one day, the whole system is supposed to collapse. But here's the strange part. That day never seems to come. The debt keeps rising. Politicians keep arguing. Experts keep warning. Markets panic for a few weeks. Then somehow, life continues. The grocery store still opens. The dollar still works. The stock market still recovers. People still go to work. Banks still lend money. And the government still finds someone willing to buy its debt. So the obvious question is, if America's debt is really so dangerous, why hasn't there been a debt crisis yet? And maybe the more uncomfortable question is, what if the crisis doesn't arrive as one dramatic collapse? What if it arrives quietly? Through higher taxes, higher prices, weaker purchasing power, slower growth, and a future that becomes more expensive every year. Because the most dangerous financial problems rarely look like disasters at first. They look normal. And that is what makes them so difficult to stop. No alarms, no sudden collapse. Just millions of ordinary people slowly realizing their money buys less, while working harder than ever to maintain the same life. A slow erosion rarely creates panic. But over time, it can quietly reshape an entire generation's future. The first mistake people make is comparing government debt to household debt. And on the surface, that comparison feels logical. If you borrow too much money personally, eventually the bank stops lending to you. Your credit score collapses, your payments become impossible, and if things get bad enough, you go bankrupt. So people assume the same thing must happen to a country. But governments are different, especially governments that borrow in their own currency. The United States does not borrow like a normal household. It borrows in dollars, and it controls the system that creates dollars. That doesn't mean debt is harmless, but it does mean the crisis works differently. A household can run out of money. A company can run out of cash. A country like the United States usually runs into a different problem. Not an inability to pay, an inability to pay without consequences. That distinction matters. Because America can issue bonds, it can roll over debt, it can collect taxes, it can cut spending, it can allow inflation to reduce the real value of debt. And in extreme situations, the central bank can support financial markets. This is why the debt crisis people imagine, a sudden moment where the United States simply runs out of money, is not usually how the story works. The real risk is slower. The government doesn't hit a wall. It enters a trap. The reason America hasn't had a debt crisis yet is not because the debt doesn't matter. It's because the United States still has something extremely powerful. Trust. Not emotional trust, financial trust. Around the world, investors need a place to park enormous amounts of money. Pension funds, insurance companies, foreign governments, banks, corporations, central banks. They are not just looking for high returns. They are looking for safety, liquidity, and scale. And the US Treasury market offers something almost no other market can offer. It is huge. It is liquid. It is backed by the world's largest economy, and it is denominated in the world's dominant reserve currency. That gives America an extraordinary privilege. The world wants dollars, and to hold dollars safely, the world often buys US government debt. This creates a strange system. America borrows heavily, but global demand for its debt remains strong because the alternatives are limited. Europe has its own structural problems. China has capital controls and trust issues. Japan has low growth and massive debt of its own. Emerging markets can offer higher yields, but not the same level of safety. So when fear enters the global economy, investors often run toward the very asset that people claim is doomed: US government debt. That is the paradox. The more unstable the world feels, the more valuable America's stability becomes. But privilege is not the same as invincibility. And that is where the danger begins.
Debt becomes truly dangerous when the cost of carrying it starts consuming the future. That cost is interest. For years, America benefited from extremely low interest rates. The government could borrow massive amounts of money, and the interest payments were manageable. That era made debt feel painless. But when interest rates rise, the math changes. Suddenly, old debt becomes more expensive to refinance. New debt costs more to issue, and interest payments begin competing with everything else the government wants to do: defense, healthcare, infrastructure, education, social security, tax cuts, emergency spending. Every dollar spent on interest is a dollar that cannot be used for something visible. Interest does not build roads. It does not train workers. It does not cure disease. It does not modernize the economy. It simply pays for promises made in the past. And this is where the debt problem becomes psychologically dangerous. Because voters like benefits. They like tax cuts. They like spending programs. They like stimulus checks. They like defense strength. They like promises. But almost nobody gets excited about paying interest. Interest is invisible. It doesn't feel like a crisis. It feels like background noise. Until one day, that background noise becomes one of the biggest expenses in the entire budget. And that is the quiet debt crisis. Not default, not collapse, but a government slowly losing flexibility.
Now here's the uncomfortable truth. Most politicians understand the debt problem. They just don't benefit from solving it. Because fixing debt requires pain now for benefits later, and politics usually rewards the opposite. Benefits now, pain later. If a politician cuts spending, people get angry immediately. If they raise taxes, voters punish them immediately. If they reform retirement programs, millions of people feel threatened immediately. If they reduce benefits, their opponents call them cruel. But if they borrow more, the consequences are delayed. The bill gets pushed into the future. And the future doesn't vote today. That is why debt keeps growing under both political parties. One side wants tax cuts without fully paying for them. The other side wants spending programs without fully funding them. And both sides accuse each other while participating in the same system. Debt becomes the compromise. Not because it is responsible, but because it is politically convenient. Borrowing allows a country to avoid choosing.
It lets voters believe they can have Scandinavian benefits, American tax rates, global military dominance, endless stimulus, and no trade-offs. But economics does not eliminate trade-offs. It only delays them. And delayed trade-offs usually become more expensive.
Now here's the uncomfortable truth. Most politicians understand the debt problem. They just don't benefit from solving it. Because fixing debt requires pain now for benefits later. And politics usually rewards the opposite. Benefits now, pain later. If a politician cuts spending, people get angry immediately. If they raise taxes, voters punish them immediately. If they reform retirement programs, millions of people feel threatened immediately. If they reduce benefits, their opponents call them cruel. But if they borrow more, the consequences are delayed. The bill gets pushed into the future. And the future doesn't vote today. That is why debt keeps growing under both political parties. One side wants tax cuts without fully paying for them. The other side wants spending programs without fully funding them. And both sides accuse each other while participating in the same system. Debt becomes the compromise. Not because it is responsible, but because it is politically convenient. Borrowing allows a country to avoid choosing. It lets voters believe they can have Scandinavian benefits, American tax rates, global military dominance, endless stimulus, and no trade-offs. But economics does not eliminate trade-offs. It only delays them. And delayed trade-offs usually become more expensive.
This story is not just about Washington. It is also about us. Because the way governments handle debt often mirrors the way individuals handle debt. People rarely destroy their finances overnight. They do it slowly, one payment at a time, one subscription at a time, one lifestyle upgrade at a time, one rationalization at a time. At first, nothing feels dangerous. The monthly payment is manageable. The credit card minimum is small. The car loan feels normal. The lifestyle looks successful. But eventually, more and more income goes toward yesterday's decisions. And that is when debt changes from a tool into a cage. The same thing can happen to a country. Debt can be useful when it builds productive capacity. It can fund infrastructure, research, education, defense, and emergency support. But debt becomes dangerous when it is used to avoid reality, to avoid hard choices, to maintain appearances, to buy comfort today with money borrowed from tomorrow. And maybe that is the real lesson. Debt is not evil, but debt always asks one question. Are you borrowing to build a stronger future? Or are you borrowing because you refuse to face the present? That question applies to governments, and it applies to us.
So no, America has not had a debt crisis yet, but that does not mean the debt doesn't matter. It means the system is strong enough to delay the consequences. And sometimes, that is what makes the consequences even more dangerous. Because when a system can delay pain for long enough, people start believing the pain will never arrive. But finance has a way of collecting every unpaid bill. Maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but but eventually, the math demands attention. If this video gave you a new way to think about debt, money, and the hidden systems behind the economy, hit the like button. It helps this channel reach more people who want deeper financial explanations without the noise. And subscribe if you want more videos about money, power, economics, and the uncomfortable incentives shaping modern life. Also, comment below. Do you think America's debt problem ends in a real crisis? Or does it slowly become a permanent tax on future generations? I want to hear your take. Until next time, the biggest financial dangers are not always the ones that explode. Sometimes, they are the ones we learn to live with.